Welcome to the FAFSA Leadership Lounge, where we dive into the policies shaping the work of Florida school leaders. I'm Michelle White, Executive Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I'm Jessica Janasiewicz, lobbyist for FAFSA in several school districts across Florida. Today, we're going to start by zooming in on the education committees within the Florida House of Representatives, their composition, leadership, subcommittees, and how they're structured as we head into the 2026 session.
So let's start with structure and guiding philosophy. The Florida House in the 24-26 cycle revamped its education committees under Speaker Designate Daniel Perez. One major shift, moving away from splitting education into rigid K-12 versus higher education silos. Instead, the Education and Employment Committee now has subcommittees that work across what they call pre-K through 20, meaning early education through post-secondary and workforce training. This reflects a change in approach. Committees will consider issues by nature of what's being addressed, workforce, student success, administration, rather than strictly by whether the institution is a high school, college, or otherwise.
Here are the key committees that are related to education in the House in their subcommittees. We have the Education and Employment Committee. This is the central standing committee for education policy and for employment and workforce issues. The subcommittees under this committee are the Career and Workforce Subcommittee, which focuses on workforce training, career readiness, job skills, that type of thing. The Education Administration Subcommittee, which oversees administrative structures and systems in education, how schools at higher ed are governed, their regulations, etc. And then we have the Student Academic Success Committee, which is focused more on outcomes, student performance measures, curriculum, interventions, things like that. There's also the Budget Committee that work with specific education-related subcommittees, the Higher Education Budget Subcommittee and the Pre-K-12 Budget Subcommittee.
So here are some of the key leaders and members as of this term. So the chair of the Education and Employment Committee will continue to be Representative Jennifer Kennedy, with the vice chair continuing to be Representative Taylor Yarkowski. The subcommittee chairs in education include for Careers and Workforce Subcommittee. The chairmanship has actually changed for the 2026 session. This year's chair will be Representative Tiffany Esposito. Last year, the committee was chaired by Representative Jaquez. The Education Administration Subcommittee, the chairmanship remains under the leadership of Representative Dana Trabolsi, who was FAFSA's Legislator of the Year in 2024. The Student Academic Success Subcommittee leadership has also changed hands, with Representative Alex Rizzo taking over from last year's chair, Fiona McFarland. Representative Rizzo has played a major role in education policy since his arrival in Tallahassee, as he was once an educator himself. FAFSA has worked closely with him on many issues in the past and will continue to do so in his new role. And of course, we can't forget the budget committees. For the budget subcommittee, the pre-K-12 budget subcommittee will continue to be led by Representative Jenna Persons-Maleka.
So what does all of this mean, and what will we need to watch in 2026? With the pre-K-20 philosophy, the policy proposals are likely to be evaluated in terms of a vertical type of alignment. How does early learning feed into K-12? How does that feed into workforce and training or higher education? This could affect everything from funding formulas to accountability systems. The chairs and vice chairs tend to set the agenda. So the people that we named really do matter. Candy, as the committee chair, signals her priorities with her district and background will probably have an outsized influence in what she chooses to focus on. The budget subcommittees will also, of course, be crucial, as they always are, whether it's pre-K-12 or higher ed. We know that we will likely see an increase, a push at least for increased funding, and see what trade-offs have to be made to get there. And because education is a political issue, teacher pay, parental rights, curriculum issues, how these committees respond to any of those pressures from public advocacy groups, school boards, teachers unions, business or workforce issues, those will all shape the bills that emerge from these committees.
So, on the Senate side, we did not really see any changes to our committee structure or makeup as we head into this 2026 session. The Senate Committee on Education Pre K through 12, which handles legislation, oversight, and policy directly related to early childhood, K 12, and supporting services, and the Appropriations Subcommittee on Pre K through 12 education will serve as specialized appropriations subcommittees overseeing that funding for pre-K through 12 education.
And these committees will work in tandem with the policy committees reviewing bills, holding hearings, proposing amendments, while the appropriations committees will weigh funding implications. Because budgeting is central to a legislator's power, these appropriations committees are often where major trade-offs are hashed out. As we move toward 2026, how much influence each committee leader wields will depend not just on their policy leanings, but also on their committee seniority, relationships within Senate leadership, and their ability to build coalitions.
Well, let's talk about who's currently leading these committees and who's serving on them. So, as a baseline, this is what may carry over or shift in 2026. So, the Education Pre K through 12 Committee is led by our chair, Senator Corey Simon, and Vice Chair, Senator Alexis Colati. Other members of the committee include Senator Lori Berman, Senator Danny Burgess, Senator Tracy Davis, Senator Don Gates, Senator Rosalind Osgood, and Senator Clay Yarborough.
The Appropriations Committee on Pre-K 12 Education in the Senate will continue to be chaired by Senator Danny Burgess. His vice chair is Senator Jason Pizzo, and other members include Senator Bradley, Senator Valadieu, Senator Gates, Senator Jones, Senator Osgood, Senator Simon, and Senator Yarborough. These leadership posts are significant because the chairs of appropriations committees often exert strong influence on what funding levels get considered, what constraints are placed on various things, and which programs survive or get trimmed. Because education funding is also one of the largest line items in the state budget, the appropriation subcommittees will be battlegrounds. Chairs of these committees will hold significant leverage in allocating or restricting funds for K-12, higher ed, workforce training, and related initiatives. And I would encourage all of our members, if you've heard any of the names of your particular senator, they are definitely someone you would like to connect with during this period, be they on the policy committee or the appropriations committee, because those are folks that you could have a direct contact and a direct link with as they build the policy and the budget for this coming session.
Absolutely. And we know that relationships are everything. It is also the beginning of National Principals Month, and it's a great opportunity to invite those senators or representatives to your school to shadow you, even for an hour, just to see what it's like to be a leader in today's schools. So, also going back to some of our committees, this week marks the first committee week of our committee meetings as we get up to the 2026 legislative session. The Senate is starting out slower in the education world. Neither the Senate Pre-K 12 policy or appropriations committees are meeting this week.
On the House side, a few of their committees will be meeting. The House Pre-K 12 Appropriations Subcommittee will convene for a panel discussion on resolving outstanding fiscal year 2024-25 budget issues. They're going to do so with testimony from the Florida Department of Education, AAA Scholarship Foundation, Step Up for Students, and several school districts. So you can bet that part of the conversation here is going to be the funding following the student for those scholarship programs and the issues that we've seen around that and how those have been resolved. In addition, the committee is expected to hear the chairman's overview for the development of the 26-27 pre-K 12 budget. So essentially what they typically do is lay out what their process will be for this year to build their budget.
Absolutely. So the House Academic Success Subcommittee will also meet to hear from state regional literacy directors on the effectiveness of student and teacher supports, as well as a presentation from the Department of Education on student outcomes and graduation requirements.
The House Education Administration Committee will also meet to receive an implementation update on portions of last year's bill, HB 1105. That was one of the large, big train bills that we talked about. And they will also hold a panel discussion on the transition planning for students with disabilities. Even though this may look like it's a slow start with none of these committees hearing any bills, these early meetings give us a very good preview of what's to come. The topics and conversations that are happening now are strong indicators of what committees will focus on this year and the policy direction that each chamber is likely to take. One last item to note. Last week, Governor Ron DeSantis said that he's open to calling a special session on property taxes. He pointed to rising costs that are squeezing Florida's homeowners and suggested that voters should have more of a direct say in how taxes are handled, even somewhat hinting on a possible constitutional amendment to eliminate property taxes on primary homes. DeSantis also noted that holding a special session during the primary season would put lawmakers on the spot, making it hard for them to oppose tax relief when voters are watching closely. But we may all recall what occurred last year when the governor called a special session that the legislature was not as excited about. They had their own ideas, so we shall see. We will stay tuned.
You just can't make this stuff up sometimes. So next, we're going to turn our attention to the federal government, where there has been a lot of concern, of course, around the shutdown of the federal government. So the government, of course, did in fact shut down at 12:01 a.m. on Wednesday, October 1st. And as of our taping, it remains closed. Here's what it could mean for education. So the US DOE says about 95% of its staff will be furloughed. The exception is federal student aid workers. They would keep things running along with a small number of employees and contractors needed for safety and essential operations. But some students and schools could feel the impact right away.
That's right. First up, Head Start. Some early learning centers rely on federal grants to pay teachers and keep their doors open. Programs that are expecting funding on October 1st might have suddenly been left without cash. And then there's also Impact Aid. That is federal money that helps school districts that are near military bases, national parks, or on Native American reservations. These are places where the local governments just can't collect as much money in property taxes because the federal government owns this land and it's not taxable. Without these new federal dollars, these schools could lose support immediately. With everything heating up at the state level and with the federal shutdown looming over us, there's definitely a lot to watch in the weeks ahead. So stick with us. We'll break it all down as it happens.
Absolutely. So this is our main update this week. We thank you so much for listening. Please share the FAFSA Leadership Lounge with your colleagues. Go to FAFSA.net and click on advocacy to see all of the bills that we're tracking in their current status. We've also had an amazing special guest in our recording studio today, Jessica Zotter Kennedy, and she's going to send us out and say bye.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michelle White and Jessica Janasiewicz. The podcast was produced by Jeff Willoughby. Original musical recordings by David Higgins. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topics, suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.